Hello everyone. Thank you all for watching the video. Wishing you all good health and peace. The dawn was still a whisper when lytuca stirred. Mist draped the hills, softening the edges of her mountain village, where the air carried the sharp tang of dew-soaked earth. Roosters crowed, their calls weaving through the rustle of bamboo leaves nudged by a restless wind. She knelt by the hearth, her hands coaxing flames from stubborn twigs, the fire's glow dancing across her face, lined not just by years, but by burdens carried in silence. A pot of corn porridge simmered, its warmth a quiet vow to her daughter Han, who slept under a frayed blanket, her small chest rising and falling. Tien, her husband, had slipped out before light, guiding their buffalo to the fields under a sky heavy with clouds. Another day stretched ahead, woven from toil and hope, yet lytuca felt a tremor in her heart, like the first crack in a frozen stream. Their home clung to the hillside, its bamboo walls weathered by rain and time. Each morning lytuca hoisted a basket of greens, mustard leaves, wild ferns, bamboo shoots, and trekked to the market, her feet tracing paths carved by countless steps. Tien labored beside her, his hoe breaking earth for their garden, where they planted dreams of cabbages and beans to ease lean days. Han, just 3, scampered between them, her laughter a fleeting brightness against the weight of survival. Lytuca watched her, a smile tugging her lips, but her eyes held shadows. She thought of years past, when Tien was caged in a prison far away, when trust had crumbled like ash in her hands. Those days had hardened her, yet left cracks that still bled when prodded. That morning rain fell in soft sheets, tapping the thatched roof like a lullaby. Lytuca tied her conical hat, its straw worn thin, and draped a raincoat over her shoulders, readying for the market trail. Tien trudged in from the garden, his clothes clinging to him, mud streaking his arms. He glanced at her, his voice rough from dawn's labor. Han still asleep? Inside curled up. Rain like this, she's better here with me, Lytuca said, her gaze lingering on him, searching for the man he'd promised to become. Then a shadow moved at the path's end. An older woman, hair silvered and sparse, stepped through the drizzle, her shawl clutched tight. It was Milan, Tien's mother, the woman lytuca had once honored as family, now a stranger bearing scars of betrayal. Milan halted, her eyes sweeping the house, then fixing on lytuca with a coldness that cut deeper than the rain. No warmth, no greeting, just words sharp as thorns. This place has held up, hasn't it? More than I thought. Lytuca's breath caught, her fingers tightening on the basket strap until her knuckles paled. 3 years ago, Han was a fragile bundle, barely 2 months old. When Milan had stood in this yard, her voice a whip. You ruined us, she'd spat, blaming lytuca for Tien's imprisonment, swallowing lies spun by wagging tongues. That night lytuca had fled into the dark. Han pressed to her chest, rain mingling with tears she refused to shed. Now Milana's presence was a blade, slicing open wounds lytuca had buried under years of grit and grace. Tien emerged, his face clouding as he saw his mother. He leaned his hoe against the wall, his voice low, taut with restraint. What brings you here? To see my son, Milan retorted, her tone edged with defiance. Or don't you care what's become of your own mother? The air thickened, heavy as the sodden earth beneath their feet. Lytuca slipped inside, her steps quiet, to check on Han, who stirred, murmuring in her sleep. She didn't want to face Milan, didn't want to hear words that might unravel her hard-won calm. But Tien's voice carried through the bamboo, each word a stone dropped into still water. You forget too easily, mother. You cast Tuca out with Han barely born, 2 months old, and you sent them into the rain. I sat in that cell trusting you'd shelter them. You left them to suffer, my wife, my child. Milan faltered, her hands twisting her shawl, her voice fraying at the edges. She'd been deceived, she said, fooled by whispers that painted lytuca as the cause of her son's fall. She'd trekked to the prison, carrying rice wrapped in banana leaves, but kept it secret, dreading Tien's wrath. Now she lived alone in a brick house down the valley, its walls sturdy but hollow, echoing her regrets. I was wrong, she murmured, her gaze dropping to the mud. But I'm your mother, Tien. Doesn't that mean anything? Tien turned, his fists clenched, his breath sharp. He looked toward the house, where lytuca stood in the doorway, Han cradled in her arms. He saw it in her silence, The weight of nights spent rocking a fevered Han, of mornings hauling baskets through fog, of years stitching their life back together alone. Those years had etched strength into her, but also pain, raw and unhealed. Forgiveness wasn't his to offer. Not yet, not fully. Lytuca stepped into the yard, Han's warmth steadying her. The rain had eased, leaving droplets that clung to leaves like forgotten tears. She met Milana's eyes not with rage but with a quiet resolve, a strength forged in solitude. She remembered those nights under a leaking roof, Han's cries piercing the dark, her own hands trembling as she counted coins for medicine. She'd survived, not for Milana's approval, not even for Asin's return, but for the child now clinging to her, whose laughter was her anchor. Asin's voice cut through the stillness, firm as the earth beneath them. Wrong is wrong, mother. Blood doesn't erase what you did. You hurt Tucia, you hurt Han. Go back to your house. If you want to fix this, come back in 3 days. Speak to Chu, not me. Say you're sorry and let it be real. Milana's shoulders sagged, her face crumpling under the weight of his words. She turned, her steps slow, her figure fading into the mist like a ghost retreating. Lytuca watched, her heart a knot of feelings too tangled to name. Forgive? She wasn't sure she could. Forget? That was impossible. Yet there was no victory in this moment, only a quiet sorrow like a song paused mid-note. Dusk settled, the sky clearing to reveal a crescent moon, its light soft against the hills. Lytuca sat by the garden, her fingers tracing the edges of a newly turned furrow. Asin joined her, his hand resting on her shoulder, a gesture heavier than words. They sat in silence, the night wrapping around them, Han's giggles drifting from the house where she played with a bamboo stick. Lytuca lifted her, kissing her dirt-streaked cheek, the child's warmth a shield against the chill within. That night she tended the hearth, the fire's crackle a steady rhythm as she stirred the porridge. Asin sat by the door, sharpening a sickle, his movements deliberate, his eyes distant. Han slept, her breaths a gentle cadence. Outside, stars blinked through the bamboo slats, their light pooling on the floor, mingling with the moon's glow. Lytuca gazed at them, her thoughts adrift. What would 3 days bring? Would Milan return, her pride softened, her words sincere? Or would the past remain a weight, pressing against their fragile peace? She thought of Han, growing in this house of woven walls and stubborn dreams. What would her daughter see? A mother who endured, or one whose heart bore too many cracks? Lytuca wanted Han to know her strength, not her wounds. She wanted her to understand that love could break, but it could also mend, stitch by careful stitch. Yet the question lingered, delicate as starlight. Could she open her heart to forgiveness, or would she guard it, shielding the family she'd fought to hold? The next day she'd rise again, her hat tied tight, her basket heavy. She'd walk the trails, her steps sure despite the load. Asin would tend the garden, Han trailing him, her voice a spark in their quiet labor. Life would unfold as it always did, like the stream winding through the valley, patient against the stones. But in her soul Lytuca carried a choice unspoken, unmade. She stepped outside, the night cool, the stars sharp. The path stretched before her, where Milan had vanished, then beyond, to the market, to tomorrow. She stood, letting the silence hold her, a breath before the dawn. Han murmured, stirring in her sleep. Lytuca returned, tucking the blanket closer, her touch soft but steady. She brushed soot from her hands, her eyes catching the moonlight. Tomorrow she'd face the day. Another step, another load. For now she let the quiet linger. A moment of stillness in a life that never paused.